All right. Hi, I'm Kitty Cahalan, and I am going to be presenting the parliamentarian training for PTA Council of PUSD. There isn't anybody in this session right now, but I'm going ahead and recording it so that we can put this up online, and then people have this refer to later on. But somebody may come in, so that may be part of the recording if somebody pops in while I'm doing this. So just to introduce myself, I am the interim parliamentarian. I was parliamentarian of council last year, but I'm now also president at Blair PTSA, and you're not supposed to be on a member of the executive board of council and be president of a unit. So we are seeking a qualified parliamentarian for the year. But in the meantime, I'm going to be providing the training. My information is here, parliamentarian at ptacouncilpusd.org. And people can email that address at any time to ask questions about parliamentarian training. So I'm going to go through the slide presentation. These slides are straight from California PTA. It's 3 different trainings from theirs. It's their parliamentary basics, their bylaws training, including how to update your bylaws, and oh, Liliana has joined us. And thirdly, their nominations committee. So Liliana, I just got started. I'm still on the first slide. We are alone, but we are recording this. So let me know if you have any questions. All right. First of all, workshop overview. We're going to start with parliamentarian role and duties. Then we're going to talk about parliamentary law, explain why we use parliamentarian procedures in PTA. We are going to do talk about motions, how to make a motion, and then your bylaws and E-Bylaws, how to update, and then finally we'll conclude with nominating committee and elections. All right. The parliamentarian's 3 key roles. The first of all, parliamentarian is a consultant to the president. They manage meetings, and they rely on parliamentary procedure. So you are their sidekick at meetings. If there are problems in a meeting that you see rules aren't being followed, you ask for a sidebar and you explain to the president that something is out of order. It's very important to understand parliamentary procedure. There is Robert's Rules of Order is the process that we follow, and that is available online or as a book. And that just explains how to make motions. And we'll talk a little bit more about parliamentary law in a minute. You are also a mentor for members to promote the rules of the game so that people understand like how to follow, how to make motions, why you're doing the things the way they are. And you also prepare the nominating committee. And the nominating committee is the committee that helps select the officers for the following year. That's a very, very important role. And you are an advisor to that committee. And then you're the facilitator for the bylaws to know and explain your bylaws and your standing rules. Your bylaws are your documented, printed rules of your organization, and you must follow them. All organizations must have some kind of documentation that explains how they're organized and who is in charge. And for most nonprofits, that they have sets of bylaws. We are required to have them by state PTA rules, and so we also need to keep them updated. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then you also chair the bylaws committee and help update those bylaws, and we'll talk a little more about that. All right, so as the consultant to the president, you want to help facilitate effective meetings. And so you want to keep a speakers list. Usually that's maybe on the agenda. Those would be the people who have the floor for agendized items. You're acting as timekeeper. So often an agenda will have a time limit for each item on there. Not all PTAs are that rigid about it, but it's a good idea if you do, if meetings tend to go long, if for, and officially they would want to keep time meetings. If you ever watch like a board meeting, you notice that they have to ask for extra time for some things if the discussions go over. So you might want to say each agenda item is going to be 10 minutes or 20 minutes, or, you know, you can assign different times depending on how much discussion there might be. And then if you go past time, you are the one keeping time, and you need a motion and a vote to increase the time. You are also advising people on parliamentary basics. So you're explaining to people how to make a motion and how to obtain the floor. You're there to answer questions, so you want to make sure that motions are done properly. And then you're identifying ways to move meetings forward. So if things are happening that are out of order, or if you know, if a question has sort of had its discussion, you know, or maybe sometimes I've seen it where you like have the motion and the vote and then the discussion, and then they move to the next item, and you're the one who's going like, wait a second, we actually have to like say yay or nay. So you're the one sort of paying attention to make sure that the process is being followed. It's a good idea to sit next to the president and be advising the president who has the floor, who's next in line to speak. And then, like I say, if there's something out of order, you can call for a sidebar with them, so you don't have to be like, man, this is a problem. You can, you know, say like, you know, this was out of order, and then the president can go, oh yeah, we forgot to have a vote for that. As a parliamentarian, you are an appointed officer to your unit. So your president would select a person that they feel is good at helping them keep track of the rules. And then that appointment is ratified by the executive board. So a nominating committee may identify somebody who would be an appropriate candidate for parliamentarian, but it is at the discretion of the president, and then, as I say, ratified by the board. So if the board is like, oh no, we can't have that person, then maybe the president appoints somebody else. But it's not the nominating committee that actually selects this person, and it's not nominated by the association. They are acting as a consultant or advisor on rules, or on making sure that things are done properly. But they do have membership rights and privileges. In some organizations, the parliamentarian doesn't vote. They're sort of an independent body. But in PTAs, they also have membership rights and privileges, meaning that they can make motions, they can second motions, and they can vote on motions, just like every other member, as long as they are a paid member of the association, which obviously they should be. You're also a full member of the executive board and have the rights to vote there as well. And by the way, you are in the parliamentary role in both executive board meetings and in association meetings. As an assistant, you are making sure that everybody understands parliamentary procedure and how to follow it. That includes your members, so that your members know that there's a time and place for them to speak up and ask for the floor or to make motions. You may help the president with meeting preparation, so you might help them with the agenda. You are tracking speakers, so if you have a long, complicated agenda, you would be the one who is telling the president who is next on the agenda. And then you're listening carefully to the proceedings to make sure that things are going the way they're supposed to be going. Your duties. These are basically the same. So I had, like I say, these slides are somebody else's. Like there are 3 presentations kind of mooshed together. So you are doing, you're going to meetings, and you are attending those meetings and following the meetings. You're acting as the president's advisor, both during meetings and at other times. You are the committee chairman for the bylaws committee. You're reviewing the bylaws annually, and the standing rules annually. The standing rules are the set of rules. They're sort of the procedures by how you operate. So your bylaws would say, you know, what your quorum is and what your dues are and things like that. Your standing rules are going to have, like, you know, our meetings are on Tuesdays. Some bylaws are older and they will still say, you know, have things like what dates the meetings are, but the newer bylaws, all that information is in the standing rules. And you have a slightly different process for updating standing rules and for updating bylaws. We'll get to that in a minute. and you instruct the nominating committee. So you are the ones sharing the rules with them once you've elected a nominating committee. Nominating committee, I'm going to get to this later, sorry. So parliamentary procedure is a time-tested method of conducting business at meetings. It helps keep things organized, and it helps allow everyone to have a voice. And it allows for majority rule, but minority voice. So, so if people, it allows for the minority, you know, or for everybody to express their views and opinions about why a particular motion should move forward and be voted on, or, you know, policy that you guys are adopting, but then, you know, the majority rules, but it gives people a chance to sway the majority to their opinion. So it's supposed to be there to provide equal opportunity. So everybody, like I say, has a voice. So that provides justice because everyone gets to be heard, and the right of the majority to decide here. So making a motion, there are 8 steps to making a motion. You've had a discussion, there is an item that the association needs to vote on. Let's give an example. You are moving forward with selecting a particular fundraising company that you would like to work with. And maybe there are 2 on the floor that people have discussed. You want to go sell the frozen cheesecakes, or you want to sell the wrapping paper. And after a discussion, probably your fundraising chair has done some vetting and talked about the advantages here. And maybe you have an opinion about this. So you, or you're ready, or you think it's time for the vote. And so you obtain the floor, you say, President, may I have the floor? The chair of the committee, that during an association meeting, that would be the president, recognizes you. The floor recognizes Bill for making, who would like to speak. Bill stands up and makes the motion. I move that we move forward with signing a contract with the frozen cheesecake company. And then the motion is seconded, and the secretary records who made that motion. The motion is seconded by another member. And the secretary obviously records that the motion is seconded. Then the chair restates the motion. So the president says, there is a motion on the floor to move forward with the fundraising and sign a contract with the frozen cheesecake company. And then, is there any further discussion? And then there is a debate or discussion, like, oh, you know, I heard their cheesecake's terrible. And then, oh, I really like wrapping paper. And so, you know, people discuss the particulars, and then as the discussion comes to a conclusion, the president says, all right, I think the discussion is concluded. We're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the Cheesecake Company say aye. Aye. All those against, nay. You count, and the chair announces the result. If more people voted yes on the Cheesecake Company, then the chair says motion passes. And if the most people don't want the cheesecake, then it says motion fails, and then you move on to the next item. All right, it is possible to amend a motion. So say you make a motion and you say, I move that we sign a contract with the Cheesecake Company for a fundraiser beginning on September 30th and concluding on October 30th. And then during the discussion, somebody says, oh, wait, no, we need to have the cheesecake delivered by October 30th. We really need to finish having that fundraising period October 15th. And so you can amend the motion. The person who makes the motion says, I amend the motion to, or you can ask for somebody, can we amend the motion to September 30th to October 15th? And then so then you amend the motion, and then that's the new motion that gets seconded. And then that becomes the motion that you are voting on. I hope that makes sense. So this is talking about, you can substitute one paragraph for another. This is if you're doing a written resolution. So if you're doing written resolutions that you're voting on, you can strike words, insert others, change paragraphs around. If you ever attend a California PTA convention, you'll see this. they adopt multi-page resolutions, and they're active discussions about changing words to change nuance of meetings, and then so the motion will be amended and then voted on as amended. There are multiple voting methods. Most of the time we're doing voice vote. So we say, excuse me, we say all in favor say aye, and then you just hear a bunch of people say aye, and then all opposed say nay. And typically most of our things are pretty non-controversial. You know, you may have 1 or 2 nays for something. If you hear a lot of nays, then you may, you know, and it might be up to half, then you want to ask for a show of hands. So you can do that. You can say, show of hand, can I see a show of hands? And then say all in favor, and then people raise their hands, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then show of hands for nay, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, motion carries. It is always majority rules, except for there are a few things where you actually need a 2/3 majority, but those are very specific: adoption of bylaws and adoption of the audit, and changes to your standing rules require a 2/3 vote. But the vast majority, passing your budget, expenditures, nomination of your election of your nominating committee, election of the nominating slate, all of those are majority rules. You can do a roll call vote. And so if you really want to, you can go through each and every attendee and, you know, like, so, you know, Bill, what's your vote? Carol, what's your vote? Jaden, what's your vote? And go through and do that. There may be times where it's awkward. People want secret ballots, so you can do it as a ballot where you have printed out the items, or you can just, you know, pass out pieces of paper and yay or nay, and they pass those back, and then you would, as the parliamentarian, would count those ballots, the yay or nay, and announce the results. Or you can do general consent, and that is where it's a completely non-controversial item, say, you know, usually adoption of the agenda, or, you know, something that you can tell there's already general agreement, and there's the motion on the floor, and you could say, are there any, with no objections, the motion carries. Somebody can express their objection to it. So usually we just do voice vote because that gives everybody a chance to say yay or nay. But these are other options for you. Voting by proxy is prohibited. This is, voting by proxy means that somebody is voting for someone else. So say a husband and wife couple, and the husband is attending the meeting, the wife is at work. The husband cannot vote on behalf of the wife, even if he's not taking his own vote. So nobody can vote for another person. You can't say, oh, my friend, she's on the phone, but she's not in the meeting. Even if it's an electronic meeting, like on Zoom or something, the person needs to be present in the meeting to have any kind of vote. So this is always the case, elections and otherwise. There's no voting by proxy. There's no voting by email. So you can't just, you know, put something out in an email and then, you know, this many yes votes back by email. That is prohibited as well. Actions taken in violation of the bylaws are null and void. So if you do something that's against the rules, then it doesn't count. It's as if the action did not take. And if it was a motion that was not legal, you might need to remake the motion. For example, it is a violation of the bylaws for a non-member to make a motion. So if somebody who is not a paid member of your association makes a motion and you vote on it, you can't move forward with that. You would need to go back and remake that motion with a member actually making the motion. A member has to do the second, and the majority of the people who voted on it also need to be paid members. This is why it's very important for your membership chair to be present and keeping track of who is in the meetings, because generally our meetings are open to anyone, including people who are not paid members, but you do not have the authority to vote. You do not have the privilege of voting or making motions or serving on a committee until you have been a paid member for 30 days. If you are a member from the last year, you have until October 30th. Your membership privileges remain until October 30th in that. And also if you're coming in from another school where you were a PTA member, your PTA membership at your new school, as soon as you've joined, you know, if you're at Hamilton and now you're at Marshall, and you were a member at Hamilton and you just joined Marshall, you can still vote in the Marshall ones. Your PTA membership from before carries through. They do make those kinds of exceptions. But if it's January and you haven't joined the PTA yet, then you cannot make motions. So that would be an example of something that's null and void. All right, we're going to move on to our bylaws training. So your bylaws are like your GPS. They are the way that you keep track of where you're going and how to get there. So they're not just your GPS. I didn't make the slide. I would call it more your like mapping tool. So it's the one that's like, here, turn left here. It explains the key roles of the parliamentarian. Sorry, these are what we're going to talk about. The key roles of the parliamentarian. We actually already talked about those. Again, you're the facilitator for the bylaws. We'll talk about what the bylaws tell you, how to update them, and some other how-tos. And then finally, we're going to conclude this with the nominating committee training. So as the parliamentarian, you are the facilitator for your bylaws, and they're your framework for your PTA and how it functions. Bylaws are legally binding, so if you are not following your bylaws, for example, you can, we all have insurance policies. The insurance policy may not pay out if you have not been following your bylaws. So it's very important to know the bylaws. It is a printed document. Every member of your organization should have a copy of your bylaws, and, or sorry, every member of your executive board should have a copy of your bylaws. It is not a document that you should have available for anyone to view. For example, it should not be on your website because that allows people who are not members to have access to it. Any member is entitled to view a copy of the bylaws. So if a member is interested in seeing the bylaws, you can show them to them. In the age of COVID, it's a little hard. You can't like, you know, come over and I'll show them to you. So, you know, you can decide how that works, but any paid member is entitled to view a copy of the bylaws and understand what's in them. And all of your officers should have their own copies of the bylaws. So I usually just, you know, print them out, make sure everybody in the organization has a current copy of the bylaws. If you don't have bylaws for your organization, if those didn't come from your previous officers, please let me know. I have the bylaws for all of our units. I have the most up-to-date ones. Bylaws tell you about your membership. They have information about boards and elections. They tell you, for example, what the different board member responsibilities are. They talk about what your standing committees are. Sorry, that would be in the standing rules, but it has committees like the nominating committees. And it also has your unit name and your ID number. So like your federal taxpayer number, your state taxpayer number, you also have a state PTA unit number and a national PTA unit number. Those may be different because they're, you know, keeping track of things differently. So if anybody asks you for those, they have those. We can also get those off of PTA EZ, the website for that. It explains policies, actions, and procedures, and it explains, has meeting information. So read them. They should be reviewed annually to determine if changes need to be made. And as of last summer, you must update them every 5 years. It used to be every 3 years, so those 2017 bylaws would need to be updated now. But now those 2017 bylaws don't need to be updated until 2022. But it doesn't mean you can't change them sooner. It just means you have to change them at 5 years. You need to change them. If you want to change them 4 years later, 3 years later, if there are changes you want to have made in your bylaws, you can do them every year if you want to. It is a bit of a process, but that's okay. you can do it as often as your unit agrees to update your bylaws, but they should at least be read and reviewed. So you as parliamentarian can ask the president to convene a committee, and then you and the committee go through the bylaws and make sure that they are reflecting the rules as you want them to for your unit. Updating your bylaws. Some things to consider for your bylaws committee. Are they a good fit? Do you need all the officers that you have? Do you need additional officers? You know, board operations and committees, do you need to add some of those extra? And then the meeting days of the week and the number of meetings that you have, your bylaws say if you have monthly association meetings, do you have quarterly association meetings, do you have association meetings every other month? You don't have to have monthly association meetings, which are the meetings for all of your members. If you don't have them every month, then that's a slightly different way of interacting with your community than if you have them monthly. So that is totally up to you, and it should suit your community. So it shouldn't just be what the board thinks, because PTA boards aren't always completely reflective of the community that they're representing. Hopefully they are, but it's really important for the executive board to be out there understanding what the needs are. So if the days of the week for your meetings are consistently conflicting with your membership, then maybe it's a good idea that you can actually change the days of the week. As long as you have notice, you don't have to have it on the day of the week that's in the bylaws, but it's a good idea to, if you're just if Monday's never going to be a good day for a meeting, and that's when your meetings are, because Mondays are short days, and, for whatever reason, it just doesn't work for people to have meetings like that, then you can change your bylaws to have it always be on Tuesdays from now on. And then, like I say, you can change individual meeting dates with notice if you have to. Your membership dues are part of your bylaws. How much should they be? What you can afford. Membership dues should not be a fundraiser. Membership dues, the $5.50 at this point go up to council, first district, state, and national PTA, because those help those upper bodies run their operations, because none of those are fundraising organizations. So they don't, our council, we live off of membership dues and the $25 we get from each unit for council assessment. And that's, we operate all of our office supplies, and all that is paid for through our unit support. So membership dues are not intended to be a fundraiser. They're really to bring people in and then make them part of the pile of organizations, starting from unit all the way up to national PTA. But it's not a bad idea to have them be, more than the $5.50 that you'd be paying up. So that way you can keep a little bit for your operations as well. But you want to keep them within a range that's affordable for your families. So a lot of units have tiered memberships. So parents might be a certain number, and then students are less. You can always charge less than your membership dues, but you don't. But you can't charge more than your membership dues without an update to your bylaws. So if your bylaws say $8 for a member, you can charge $7, but you can't charge $9 until you've updated your bylaws and adopted them, and then you can start charging new membership dues. Standing rules are a separate document that explain more about this. Like that might say our health and safety VP is in charge of this, and maybe this year the health and safety VP is in charge of COVID response and finding ways to do virtual meetings. And then maybe next year, if we're back in person, the health and safety chair is in charge of, Red Ribbon Week, or, like something else. So you can decide in your standing rules, like what the responsibilities are. And then you also, your standing rules also talk about what your standing committees are and how many chairs, and the chairs for each of those. Doesn't specify which person, but that, maybe you have a fundraising committee, and maybe you have a membership committee. Actually, you always have a membership committee. But if you don't have a fundraising VP, your standing rules could still say we do have a fundraising committee. And then that chair is part of that. Your standing rules don't have to go through the same e-bylaws procedure. It's a document that you would have go around with your bylaws. So if your executive board has copies of the bylaws, they should also have copies of the standing rules, and that is really part of your operations. But you can edit your standing rules and update your standing rules without going through the whole e-bylaws procedure, which goes through channels up to California State PTA and comes back and signed by the state parliamentarian and then comes back down. The standing rules can just be amended and adopted by your unit with a 2/3 rule, but you must give notice. And I cannot remember what the notice is, but 30 days is always safe. They say we're going to update our standing rules, but I will find out if anybody has questions. Just send me an email at parliamentarian@ptacouncilpusd.org, and I will find out what is the notice period to update your standing rules. You want to make sure things like that are noticed, so that if somebody's like, I don't want that rule to change, or I want this rule to change to this other thing, they would be sure to attend the meeting where you're going to vote on that. And adopting new standing rules does require a 2/3 majority vote. All right, so e-bylaws is the process by which you update your bylaws, your bylaws which come from the state PTA. There are certain things in all PTAs in California. They will have certain things that you cannot change, including the formula for quorum. The formula for quorum is based on number of officers and unit size. It is set by them. So if your bylaws say your quorum is 16, likely you can't change your quorum to be lower than 16 unless maybe you update your bylaws to get rid of all your officers. But that's not necessarily a good idea, because you need officers, and it's a good idea to have a certain number of officers in your bylaws that actually can do all the functions of your unit. So don't get rid of your officers. I think you have to have more than 10 officers and chairs anyway before that affects your quorum. But your quorum is set by your unit, by the state formula, and so you can't adjust that. And there are other certain things you will know when you go into e-bylaws. There will be certain things that it lets you change, and certain things that it doesn't let you change. And the things that you can't change are things that state requires. Some of those are national PTA requirements. Some of those are requirements for nonprofits. But you have some flexibility to suit your unit. So you go to California State PTA, which is capta.org, and you click on PTA leaders, and then you click on the left menu, the PTA leaders up top, and then on the left menu you click on bylaws and standing rules, and then you select check out bylaws, and then you could do English or bilingual. And so if you need bylaws in a language other than English, please let me know, and we can work with the First District parliamentarian who's a lot more experienced with doing the non-English bylaws than I do. That is possible, but e-bylaws is, I believe, in English. It looks like bilingual, but I'm not sure what language they have. So we can talk more about that if that's a question for you. You would then open this up, and then you would need to request a username and password. It is possible that the last time your bylaws were updated, your parliamentarian at that time, if it wasn't you, got a username and password. And if that's the case, then you could just ask them for that username and password and log in there. Otherwise, you click on request a username and password, and then they will email it to you, and then you can get started. So don't think that the minute you log in, you're gonna immediately get access to the e-bylaws document. There's that waiting period while you wait for that username and password. And then once you have that username and password, you can click on Access e-bylaws. A document will open up, and you can start editing the things that you're allowed to edit. So this is if you're the first time doing it and you don't have the username and password. The systems are a little bit kludgy sometimes. CAPTA is updating things right now, but some of their stuff is 90s era, in my opinion, or early 2000s. try a Chrome browser if you're on a Mac, and follow these, close multiple browser windows and go directly with E-Bylaws with one window open. You also might need to enable the Adobe Flash plugin. I know that they're updating stuff so that by December that should be gone because Flash is going away. But for now, you may need to enable Adobe Flash on your browser. Oh, and E-Bylaws needs you're going to need a computer to do it. It's not compatible with phones or tablets, unfortunately. So if you are the parliamentarian, and you don't have access to a computer, please let me know. We can try to get you access to a computer to do these things. So this is the screen that you would see when you first open it up. It gives you the unit information. Most of these would be pre-populated for you. And if you need to change any of these things, for example, if your school used to be a K6 and now it's a K5, you won't be able to change that in here, but we can get that changed for you. So you let me know. I let First District know. First District lets state know. The state parliamentarian can go in and change the grade span of your school. They can change your fiscal year. If your school has changed address, like you know, say there was a address change in the city and now it was on a corner and it used to be on this street. And so any of that, that would require a request from the change. If you're changing the name of your PTSA, for example, the school that my kids attend is the PTA name for whatever reason includes Magnet, and it's not supposed to include Magnet, so we need to update the name to be Blair School PTSA and not Blair IB Magnet. So you can do all those requests, and then when you then they'll let you know that it's there, and then you log in the next time, and the new information should be pre-populated into this. This is where you can change some of the officers. So your executive vice president, you can change certain things like you're nominating the number of nominating committee members. There may be like a lower limit or an upper limit on how much you can do, but you get some options on how many nominating committee members you have, whether you have a corresponding secretary or a financial secretary. Most units, if they have a secretary only, then it's a recording secretary. That's the person who's taking the minutes and basically doing all the secretarial work. So you may select to have a corresponding secretary and a financial secretary as well. The financial secretary is basically the treasurer's clerk, and the corresponding secretary is the one who's like doing a lot of the communications work. Whereas, like I say, the recording secretary would be the one doing that. But usually, in a lot of units, the recording and corresponding secretary roles are combined. The auditor is an officer. If that's no, then you would still have an auditor, but they would be appointed. So, that's the question of, does the nominating committee select the auditor, or does the president select an auditor, and then that is ratified by the executive board. So these are the things you can change. Normally, you would not be able to change this July 1 date that is supposed to go with your financial year. So if the officers assume duty on July 1, if your fiscal year starts on July 1, if your fiscal year starts on June 1, then your officers would assume duties on June 1. You don't want a gap between the date that your fiscal year begins and your new officers take office. See. Okay, so this is where you would talk about when your meetings are. So you can have the first Tuesday, third Thursday of the month. You can talk about and executive board meetings must be at least 14 days before association meetings. If on a given month you can't do it that way, because say you have November, it's Thanksgiving, and your meeting is the fourth Thursday of the month, but in November you have it on the third Thursday because fourth Thursday is Thanksgiving. Your board meeting is normally the second of the month. That's okay. You can do that as long as you notice ahead of time, like this is when the meetings are going to be. You have to give 30 days notice if you're changing the date of a meeting from when it's in your bylaws. these things, board members needed to call a special meeting. Now, a president can always call a special meeting, but if a president doesn't want to, say there's a crisis and the president's, you know, in the hospital or whatever, and board members need to call a meeting, this is the number that you need. You can make that really low if you want to lower the barrier so that it doesn't take a lot of board members, or you can make that number really high if you want to make sure that they're not just like calling meetings all the time. So that's sort of up to you and your membership to decide that. Quorum, I don't think that that's very, like I say, that's not very flexible. So I'm not sure why that's a box there. I guess you can make your quorum higher, but you don't want to have too low a quorum anyway, because quorum prevents you from having a meeting so small that's allowed that you just, you know, like we got this really small quorum, we have this really small group that's making all the decisions, and we're not really allowing other people in. So the quorum is there to protect the association from things sort of getting hijacked by a small group of people. All right, in order to submit, after you've completed all the checkboxes in the E-Bylaws, there are some procedures. First District has a change form that I can, if you are updating your bylaws, let me know and I'll send you the link for that change form. And you fill out that change form with like, here's everything we're changing. We're turning the VP of Health and Safety into a VP of Fundraising, and we're changing our dues from $8 to $9. Like, you would fill all that information out. You don't have to get approval from your association for bylaws changes before you send it up to get approved by the state. But they should be aware of what you're doing, because you don't want to go through this whole process of changing the bylaws and doing all these things, and then waiting a few months for the state to get back to you with the approved bylaws, and then asking the unit to adopt them, and the unit's like, wait, we didn't want this change. So make sure that people know what's happening, but the bylaws don't get adopted before they get sent up. So you sort of take the temperature of the room, update the documents. You will need to print out multiple copies. The instructions are in there, and I cannot remember. I think it's 2 full copies, front and back. So, you know, first page, second page, third page, fourth page, you know, and front and back pages. And then you also need several additional copies of the page that has the signature page, and you want whatever is on the front and the back of that signature page, because they will send those back, but they'll keep the copies that have the wet signature from the state parliamentarian. They send those back, you get those signed, and then you send those additional signature sheets back up, but you keep your full copies that also have signed the wet signatures. So you'll have each of those signature sheets will be signed by the state parliamentarian, and then they come back down to you, and then you, should go actually through this procedure. So the unit bylaws for review are sent up to council. That's me. We look at them, and then we send them to First District. First District looks through them, makes sure they're okay, that everything's there, sends them to state. State reviews and approves them, sends them to district. District sends them to council. I send them to your unit. Your unit has all these documents. You have the 2 copies of the full copies of the bylaws, plus all the additional signature sheets. You then give 30 days notice sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So you send your bylaws to that. You have the hard copy, double-sided, with the check pages. We'll talk about this later. I have to see what they mean. Like I said, I didn't make these slides. So 2 copies plus 4 additional signature pages printed on both sides. So whatever that is on the other side of that page in the full copies of your bylaws, you want 4 additional sheets of that paper, plus the bylaws submittal form that's from the from First District. And then you want to keep a copy for your records as well, so that you know what it is that you sent up. And then after they sign them, they come back to you through me. And then you must give 30 days notice that you're going to be doing adoption of new bylaws. So if you get them back in September, then maybe you notice it in September, and then at your October meeting, you actually present them and have a motion to adopt. And by the way, here's a wrinkle. Your committee that went through the bylaws is the one that worked on this. And so your committee makes the motion. A committee motion does not need a second. So that's just something to know. If an elected committee makes a motion to approve something, then it can just go straight to vote. It does require a 2/3 vote for adoption of those new bylaws. Then the president and the secretary sign and update the bylaws, and then the copies of the signature page get sent to me. I keep one for my records. I send a copy back to First District, and they send one to state. So everybody has a copy of the wet signatures. Standing rules. You can go to this link here to learn more about updating your standing rules. And we can have a separate training for standing rules if there's demand for that. So send me an email at parliamentarian@ptacouncilpusd.org if you want to do a standing rules training. Finally, nominations and elections. This is a really important process that PTAs must go through. Start with this quote that was given by our state parliamentarian. A PTA can be no more effective than its leadership. The nominating committee is a special committee and holds the key to a successful PTA. Its responsibility is to present the best qualified nominees for office. So that's from the Georgia PTA, but it's true in California too. The nominations process is extremely important and has tremendous influence on the future of your PTA. So please do not blow off the nominating committee. It is not appropriate for the president to just decide who the next president is. It has to be a democratic process that involves many members from your unit, and it should be taken seriously. The first step is to consult your PTA bylaws and the California PTA toolkit. The bylaws relevant sections are Articles 5 and 6. Article 5 is officers and their election. Article 6 is duties of officers and their chairpersons. You would have a review of that and make sure that that you have a common understanding of what the different officers do, what their duties are, and that should help you start to build a list of like the types of people that would be needed for it. For example, a secretary needs to be at a meeting because they're taking the minutes. So if you have your meetings during a school day, a teacher would not be an appropriate candidate for secretary because your secretary needs to actually be at the meeting. So rather than have placeholders for some of these positions, you really want people whose life circumstances and experience fits that, and that is the nominating committee's job to figure all that out. Nominating committee is elected by the association at least 60 days prior to election. Most of our election meetings, the vast majority of California PTAs, and it is in your bylaws, the date your election meeting is. Most of us have them in March. It used to be a lot of them were in April because we used to start later in September and then we would end in June. But most of us across California have moved to August start dates and ending in May. And so we need that nominating committee or nominating election meeting in March. So your bylaws will tell you what your association meeting has marked, and it must be an association meeting. If you don't have association meetings every month, then the election meeting needs to be in the month that it is. So if you're setting up when your association meetings are, have it either in February or March, and March is late enough to have done all the work to figure out who should be an officer for the next year. So we always recommend having your election in March and having an association meeting in March so that you can do that election. I hope that all makes sense. So if you are doing that, you would need to elect your nominating committee at least 60 days prior to the election. So that would usually be at a January meeting. If you don't have an association meeting in January, then it needs to be the one before that. So maybe you have an association meeting in November. If November is your last association meeting before your election meeting, that's when you need to elect the nominating committee. It is a unique committee. It has a specific goal of finding officers for the next year, and it's really important. Everybody who was on last year's nominating committee is ineligible for this year. You can only be on a committee at most every other year. And it serves from when it's elected in November or January, depending on when your association meetings are. And it serves until the election. And your president is also ineligible to be on the nominating committee. So it needs to be unique members. And you as parliamentarian are the advisor to the committee. So the members for that committee must be knowledgeable about PTA. They must be aware of potential nominees to select. They should be familiar with the qualifications required for the job. So for example, like I say, a secretary needs to be at meetings. So you shouldn't they shouldn't nominate somebody for a position that needs to be at monthly meetings or association meetings and board meetings who can't actually attend meetings. That's an example. That doesn't mean every officer has to be somebody who comes to every meeting, but secretary is somebody that you need at every meeting. So they need to be willing to devote the time to commit to finding the right officers. And they also need to maintain confidentiality. When you're talking about who is appropriate and who is not, that can cause hurt feelings if people know that you're saying like, I'm not sure that person would be a great president. They're not very diplomatic and they're kind of cliquish. You know, these are things that you might want to keep within a small group so that you don't hurt anybody's feelings, because you're looking out for the best interests of the unit. But people might take your, those discussions the wrong way. You don't want it to make it seem like it's personal, but it's just better that, you have an honest discussion about who's qualified for the different positions with an understanding that you're not going to talk outside of the committee what you actually said about other people. Parliamentarian gives the instructions to the nominating committee. So you would, so you say you meet your nominating committee, you elect your nominating committee. Say you do it at your November meeting. You elect your nominating committee. The number of committee members required, also in your bylaws. Some will have, it's usually like 3 or 4 members, maybe 5, and then with an alternate. So if somebody has to drop off, you already have somebody elected who then can slip into that seat. So the alternate can attend the meetings so that they're aware of the discussions, but they don't have a vote unless one of the regular members drops off the committee. You might have 1 or 2 alternates. That also depends on your bylaws. You need to elect all those. So you would say, does anybody want to serve on a nominating committee? And then somebody stands up and they say they can't have served the previous year and they can't be the president. The president is welcome to advise the nominating committee on people that they think would be good for positions, including themselves if they want to continue as president the next year, if they're only they're only concluding their first year that year. But the president does not get a say in what the nominating slate is going to come out. So they meet in executive session. You have frank, open discussions about who's appropriate. And your deliberations are confidential, and then you serve until the election. You can do applications if you want. So you could put out there like, hey, are you interested in being in PTA? And these are all the positions that we have. Click off the ones you're interested in. Tell us why you're qualified for that. You can interview people. These are all options. Your PTA should be so lucky to have lots of people stepping up. Most people are twisting arms, but if that's not the case for you, then great. But make sure that you do your due diligence to find the best qualified people. You want to review the position and requirements or the duties for each job, and determine the skill sets needed for each. So your auditor or your treasurer, it would be nice if they have some ability to be organized, if they have some financial background. That's a bonus. Most don't, but it's great if they do. But you want to make sure that for certain positions you get people who are like, this person really needs a good communicator. This person really needs somebody who's organized. This person really needs somebody who has these specific skills. go through your membership lists and make sure that you're pulling from a diverse set of people. You know, you don't want to just stay within certain groups of friends or types of people. You want to make sure you're getting a diverse group of people, selecting the best candidates and providing a balanced slate. So, you know, maybe gender diversity, maybe some ethnic or racial diversity, people who are different kinds of stakeholders. If you have programs at your school, then, you know, if you have like a dual language and a not dual language, then, you know, people from different programs, so you have all the perspectives at your school. You want people who are supporters of PTA, you want people who are knowledgeable about PTA, you want people who work well with others, who are dependable and have time to serve, and if they have special skills or knowledge or experience, that's all the better. But it's also nice to have that balance. You don't necessarily want every single PTA board to have only the experienced people, because the whole point of PTA's board, it's not the whole point, the point is to run it. But one of the bonuses of having PTA board and serving on a board is it gives new people skills, and it gives new people opportunities to grow their own leadership skills. And so you want to make sure that you are bringing in sort of the fresh blood, bringing in like those younger kindergarten parents or 6th grade or 9th grade parents, and giving them opportunities to grow their skills and their capacity to serve the school. So you also, you want a blend of people from different experience levels as well. You want to know what the term limits are. So if your president, or if any officer, in fact, has served for 2 years, if they're finishing their 2nd year, they are not eligible. You want to think about where and when school staff would serve. There are certain positions that are great for school staff, and there are other ones that are, there could be conflicts of interest or time considerations if you're getting school staff. You can have student members. Student members can be on PTA boards at any level. They don't have to be a PTSA for a student to serve on the board. So if you have like a really energetic 5th grader who wants to serve as a board member, you can actually do that. So you may want to have them have a committee that advises them, but these are possible if you want. And then you really want to be careful about your financial officers. You want to make sure that they don't, that they are very trustworthy and very organized and very transparent, and they care about transparency of the organization. You also want to make sure that you don't elect officers who can't be officers together. So the bylaws say who your check signers are, and if your check signers, your president, your treasurer, and then there's always a 3rd person who's a check signer. That is, your bylaws state who that is. So for some, that might be the historian. For some, that might be the first VP who's membership VP or whatever. Those officers cannot be related to each other or to the auditor. So those 4 officers can't be in any way related to each other by blood, marriage, or the household. They can't live together. So you want to make sure that your financial officers don't have a family connection with other signers, check signers. Your nominating committee then contacts candidates, and they are honest about the responsibilities and the time commitments, and they ask if they're willing to serve. But don't make promises. Don't say like, we're putting you on the slate as president. You just ask if they're willing and say, we're interested in considering you for it. And then after your committee has decided what the final slate is, you go back to everybody that you put up for consideration or who said that they were interested for consideration, and you let them know whether they were on the slate or not. After you have selected the people to fill all of your board positions, hopefully you are able to fill all the board positions, but you do have a minimum of needing to fill president, secretary, and treasurer. But you know, your job is really to fill the whole board. You can't always find everybody, but you should. But you need by the end of the year to have for the next year a president, treasurer, and secretary. So hopefully you have those filled by then. You take a vote, and you say like, this is the slate we want. You record all that, and then you create a report. The report is probably just a list. These are who our nominating committee is selected, signed by all the committee members, and then you submit to the association 28 days prior to the election meeting. So if your election meeting is March 20th, then by February, whatever that date is, 21st or 2nd, you would give that to the president, and then the president announces, usually that would be at your meeting the month before, but they can also electronically submit it. That this is our slate of candidates that the committee members have selected, and we will be electing them at our March meeting. So you can mail that out, and then the chairman at the association meeting where you're actually doing the election, the chairman stands up and you're actually going to read from the bylaws the sections related to the election. You read those so that everybody's very clear on what you're supposed to be doing. Then the chairman reads the association. For president, the nominating committee has selected the following: for president, this person; first vice president, this person; treasurer, this person. They read all those, right? And then you have, when you have the actual election. I apparently ran out of slides, so that means we're almost done. Yay! You have the election at the election meeting. After you have read that, again, you are a committee, and so you don't need a second. So then you make you're reading that is the motion. We make a motion to adopt the slate. It does not need a second because you came up with this by committee. And then the president then, and the bylaws outline this for you. And there's also a script at capta.org that you can look up that tells you exactly what to say to have a proper election. So I can send you that, or you can look it up on capta.org for election script. The president then asks for nominations from the floor. Do we have a nomination from the floor for president? And if there are none, or you can just, ask for if there are nominations from the floor for any of the positions. If there are, then you can take that one off the slate. Say only secretary has a person who wants to do it and wants to be considered instead of the person on the slate. You can remove that person from the slate, vote on the, oh, sorry. I have a landline and it's very annoying. If you, so if somebody nominates themselves from the floor, or somebody is nominated from the floor, say it's secretary. So then you say, like, you have a vote for secretary. So all in favor of Cindy for secretary, say aye, or you can do it as a ballot vote if it's awkward. You can have everybody write down like Cindy or Stan. And then you can count up and say who wins that. And then you can elect everybody. If there are no other nominations for other positions, then you have a nomination or election on the rest of the slate. So all those in favor of accepting the slate as presented by the nominating committee minus the secretary, say aye, aye. And then that's it. And then, like I say, you have a separate vote for the committee member, or for the board member who has a second candidate. Or you can go through each one. Are there any nominations on the floor for president? Are there any nominations on the floor for vice president? Are they? That's pretty much it. If it comes to election season, and if we don't have another parliamentarian and I'm still interim, I will happily help you with that. I'll help you anyway. And if whoever is parliamentarian needs help, I'm happy to answer questions when election time comes around. And that is it. I can take questions. Liliana, I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself and ask any questions. So I'll give it like an awkward 15 seconds here in case you want to. All right. If not, there are no other questions. Again, parliamentarian at PTACouncilPUSD.org. I am happy to answer any questions. And I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to stop the recording.